Springtime in Wisconsin, an apple orchard in bloom. Apples have been grown commercially in Wisconsin for well over a century. Today, orchards are spread throughout the state in 46 counties. In many of these orchards, growers are utilizing integrated pest management techniques, or IPM, to reduce the use of pesticides on their crops. IPM is a method of replacing chemical inputs with information.
Modern insecticides kind of developed during World War II, and they were used in agriculture starting in the late 1940s and 1950s. And they were wonderful tools because they were very cheap and they were incredibly effective, and they yielded crops of quality and quantity that we had never experienced before. And so it was very easy for farmers to adopt these new tools and to use them and use them heavily. But within about 10 years or so, we started seeing a lot of new pest problems develop. The situation was that a lot of our recent pest problems actually are caused by the use of pesticides. Certain types of pesticides that we call broad spectrum pesticides actually kill beneficial organisms that help keep some of our pests under control. And so during the 1950s and the 1960s, there was a lot of research in developing ways to integrate the use of necessary pesticides with these beneficial organisms that occur in agriculture. And so the term integrated control was developed to talk about this integration of chemical and biological controls.
The concept of integrated control has evolved into integrated pest management, or IPM, a method of controlling pests and diseases by replacing pesticides with information. Bob Barthel and Nino Ridgway of Barthel Fruit Farm in Mequon, Wisconsin, are dedicated to the use of IPM techniques in their orchard.
Integrated pest management is a process where we're monitoring the environment, the insects and the disease, and trying to decide whether we need to control the insect or not. It's the least input for the most output. The old-fashioned methods, whereas you went out and controlled, you sprayed, used a pesticide, whether or not the insect was present or the disease was present. Now we know the biology of the insect, we know the development of the disease, we can determine whether we have to do anything or not. We're substituting management for pesticides.
This is an attempt to find out, do we really have a problem? Do we really have a problem that we need to do something about? And once we find out what the problem is, then we can decide, do we use a chemical, do we use a trap, do we use some other method, or do we just decide, well, it's going to be a 5 or 10% loss, we're not going to worry about it.
We have relatively good research that indicates at what level a particular pest will cause economic damage.
3 of those.
And so if the numbers are not at that level, it makes sense not to use any types of controls, chemical controls or other types of controls, because those are expensive inputs into the production system of the crop. And if the expense isn't warranted, then the grower is best off not to do anything except for to continue to check on a weekly basis. And if the pest numbers increase above the action thresholds, then it's necessary to do some sort of pest management practice.
Bill Stone makes use of integrated pest management techniques at Brighton Woods Orchard in Burlington, Wisconsin, where he raises over 200 varieties of apples.
It started out as a hobby. My father-in-law started the orchard in 1950. He planted about 25 varieties of apples that he remembered when he was a kid. Then when I married into the family in the 60s, we decided we would expand the orchard a little bit. We kept getting requests, why don't you grow Northwestern Greenings? Or, gee, when I was a kid, I used to eat snow apples. Do you grow snow apples? So we started putting in apples that people would ask for. And then I just sort of got hooked. I used to collect stamps as a kid, now I collect trees.
This collector of trees also sees the value of reducing pesticide use in his orchard by making use of such IPM methods as monitoring, scouting, and trapping.
The norm probably used to be you get that sprayer out every 10 to 14 days, whether you need it or not. You didn't know if you needed it or not because there was no way to monitor, particularly the insects. I scout the orchard all the time. You're looking for scab, you're looking for rodents, you're looking for just anything that would be a problem. Now this is a tentiform leaf miner trap, and each of these little devils is a tentiform moth. I used to get really excited when I'd see these things, and you see something like that and you'd say, oh my God, I should spray it. I should get rid of this thing. So I've been getting more adventuresome, and I trap now mainly to decide whether I should spray next year. So it's more a guide to me as to whether I have to be concerned next year. And so I did not spray for tentiform leaf miner this year. And it's comforting to have a test like this. They're a trap that you can go to and, say, hey, this stuff, I don't need to. Gives you a little sense of comfort.
Insect trapping and orchard scouting are important elements of an integrated pest management program. Monitoring weather data also plays a key role, as explained by Bob Barthel.
We need to keep track of the weather so we can plug in what's happening for the insects and the diseases. So we started years back by using thermometers so we could track the minimum and maximum temperatures. Well, with electronics, we went to a little mini station. This keeps track of this is a leaf wetness sensor, so it knows when the leaves are wet, and it records temperature and humidity onto a little data logger. From there, we went to a little bit larger station, which does the same thing: leaf wetness, temperature, humidity, and then rainfall. From these parameters, I'm able to put out a report so I can see when we have the symptoms of this disease happening, and it gives me an idea of when I need to control for it, or I don't have to, so I can only spray when it's necessary. To buy this equipment, you can save it in 1 or 2 sprays in a year. It'll pay back even in the first year. I added another main station this year, which is probably about 3 times more expensive than what you're seeing behind me, but I know that's going to pay itself back.
I remember for a couple of years there, it was kind of tough to believe the weather information, believe the trap numbers, and go with that. And we made a couple of mistakes. We did make a couple of mistakes. So it takes more management, it takes more education, and it takes the ability to sleep with the anxiety the first few years while you're feeling your way through it and putting up with the errors that you make.
You're walking a tightrope, okay? You're inputting your management skills and the commitment to go out and monitor twice a week or at least once weekly versus going out and jumping on the spray rig every 10 days. Given the increase of costs of the chemicals, more growers are getting pushed to IPM, which is good because it's less expensive now to monitor than it is to do the conventional calendar sprays. The resistance is as if you mess up, if you miss an infection period, if you miss a flight of an insect, you have crop damage, and that's hard to take.
It's necessary for the farmer to come out and to inspect the trees, to see what pest problems are present, and then make a decision based upon what is actually happening in the orchard. So instead of spraying every week or 10 days, it may mean that a grower can go 3 or 4 weeks without any significant pest pressure. And in that case, it's actually an economically beneficial decision not to spend money on pesticides and the application of pesticides. It makes economic sense to do that, as well as it's good farm practices, and it makes good environmental sense as well.
So it's really not to protect the consumer so much from pesticides. It's to be sensitive to the environment and to cut down the use or utilization of chemicals in the environment. And that means not only it's better probably for the land and the water, the groundwater, but it's certainly cheaper, and it gets to be an economic issue.
It's important to all of us. I live here, so it's important for me not to spray. It's important for my employees not to be exposed to the pesticides we'd normally be using. It's important to the customer that they have clean, healthy fruit.
And it's important to the environment. We have a lot of wildlife on the farm. We're kind of proud of that, even though sometimes they cause problems, that we have a huge diversity of wildlife on the farm, which tells us that we have a healthy place for animals to live, and we don't want to impact them unnecessarily.
Integrated pest management is never a recipe. The only thing that's uniform throughout is the need to monitor on a regular basis. The actual decisions that come out of the information from the monitoring are going to be quite different from grower to grower based upon their own conditions. So for that reason, each apple grower has to be very knowledgeable about the entire pest complex and about all the different tools that are available for controlling pests, and then make decisions based upon the information that they find in their own orchards.
Integrated pest management, not a recipe, but an approach that relies on grower knowledge and commitment to make informed decisions regarding pest problems. By making use of IPM strategies, Wisconsin apple growers are realizing economic and environmental benefits, a payoff that benefits us all.